Twitch is being its usual self today. Every time I change the every time I change the title and the game we're playing, whether the stream's live or not, it tells me there's a problem editing status after I've logged out and logged in twice. Awesome. Finally. So we're picking back up with our tutorial Night Fortress tonight, guys. Once again, we're out of our medicine, out of our minds. Let's go. Quick check on our stocks. Says we've got plenty of drink and food. That's the first thing I check when I come back from a save. Next thing I'd be checking is my dwarven labor. Make sure I wasn't. You can see my little achievements at the bottom there from SoundSense. It basically monitors the game for certain events and plays little pop-up achievements when things happen. It has no actual game effect whatsoever. Okay, looks like we've temporarily got our miners doing masonry work. We need to look and see what our masonry load is. And everything else looks okay. Got these 4 guys in a squad in training. At least they should be training, and they don't appear to be. But we need to check their schedule and their training barracks and make sure they have their equipment. So let's do that. So these guys are all equipped. That's first thing. That's good. Check their schedule. According to this, we've got them set to train properly. Good. Oh, therapist is just reading them wrong. They're in the middle of a training session with drills. So we're going to continue excavating that magnetite cluster we found the first time out. We're going to start smelting that down, and if we've got flux on site, I don't know that we've seen flux yet, but we'll get iron, and if we've got flux, we'll go straight into steel. And chances are good, since we found flux here, and we found iron here, and we found iron here, we'll probably find iron down here as well. Now, if I had DF hack, I could show you dig V, which would basically allow me to mark this entire cluster wherever it roams down to for mining with the press of a single button instead of having to go back and constantly mining it out or mining out squares. Let's look in on our metal smithing here and see if we've got that up and running yet. That's wood. There's metal smithing. Need to get somebody doing our smelting now, because we've got these smelters. It'd be a real shame if they weren't doing anything this entire time. Smelt magnetite ore, we'll put that on repeat, and we'll stick that on all of these, because any iron we've got, we're going to want smelted. Period. There's no iron we're ever going to want to do anything else with other than smelt, so go ahead and get that set up. That'll basically put the job on repeat permanently for dwarves to come and do that job. As long as we've got magnetite, they'll start gathering it. Now here comes our first elven caravan, and so this will be interesting because, as I recall, they re-enabled the diplomat. I don't know that we've seen an elven diplomat yet. We'll see if they come and tell us about how terrible we are because we cut too many trees. Turn this off. This will say that this stockpile is good for wood, but we're not allowing any plant or animal or non-plant and non-animal. So this should disable this, and it won't store the logs here right now. But once we get some more haulers, we'll turn that on, and we'll basically pull all the logs in. Second thought, we'll turn that on because that wood pile downstairs is going to pull all the wood anyway, and this will just cut down on travel trips, hopefully. Those are all trap components we confiscated from the original Dwarven caravan, so we'll go ahead and just throw those up into a weapon trap. And we need to think about appointing a broker because we don't have one. So right now, in our starting 7, we've got some folks who are novice, kind of talky job people. We've got a couple of peasants who arrived who have some conversational skill. Let's see if Fath here can become a liar. Because there are certain social skills that are forbidden to dwarves, and some social skills that can't have at the same time. And as I recall, someone who can be a consoler cannot be a liar, or something vice versa. So let's find Fath and pull up her details. She can be a consoler. Let's see here. would make a good liar. So I'm thinking this person would be a reasonable choice for a broker. So we'll take Fath and convert to a broker. This is just my custom profession. All my broker profession is nothing, because I want my broker going to the trading depot and doing trading. I don't want them doing anything else. Now, between caravans, I may turn on other jobs for my broker. For example, Fath here makes a reasonably good gem setter. We might have her sit and put things into sockets while we're waiting on the caravan to arrive. But once the caravan's here, I want Fath doing broker duties, not gem setting. Yeah, that doesn't actually give Fath the broker position. We actually have to appoint Fath here. And I think I just crashed Dwarf Fortress. Nope, there we go. Good. Not behaving normal. There we go. Perfect. Okay, so now our broker's appointed. We've got somebody to do our trading for us. Let's talk about goods for trading here. We've got some weapons. With the elves, you never want to trade wood unless you're trying to piss them off. So you have to be really careful about items that came from outside your fort being transitioned to elves. It's entirely possible. Actually, we're going to melt those down. Forget that. It's entirely possible, for example, if I traded a bin made out of coffee wood here, what would basically happen is the elves would immediately be torqued off by us. They would not accept our trade, no matter how profitable it might otherwise have been. They would cut off all relations with us for this season and possibly go on to declare war or other bad things if you continue to torque them off. So with the elves, you want to make sure you're not offering wood for sale or bins for sale. You have to watch about items like this that have been decorated, because it's possible they were decorated with wood before they arrived at your fortress, so you need to take a look at them and look at their descriptions if you're going to offer them. So this is decorated only with bone and shell, and it's a gem, so we're safe to offer that one for trade. And you could look at each one of these if you were curious. You go in a description for each one, and that's just a wood opal. Despite the name, it's not really wood. And this is a fortification agate. And fortification agates are not wood either. So we can sell all those large gems that really don't have any other real purpose in our fort. Let's see what else we got here. Gem bin. Sell my gem bins. These barrels. You have to watch barrels. So this is a barrel made out of ginkgo wood. If I wanted to sell this to the elves, they would get pissed because of the barrel. So barrels and bins, you just have to be real careful what you're selling to elves. If you're going to sell, for example, prepared food to your elves, prepared food is valuable, and selling it to caravans will make you a good chunk of money. You can sell them the food just fine, but you can't sell them the food if it's in a barrel. So you actually have to maintain a separate food stockpile with no barrels in it at that point to pull just the meals to your trading depot. Selling booze to the elves implies that you're using either rock pots or metal barrels. I wouldn't use metal barrels to sell stuff, unless I just didn't know what else to do with it. And we've got some blocks. We can look and see if we've got any blocks that are of any high value. We can just sell those. I'm not building anything with them right now. So we built most of the first level out of siltstone, if I recall correctly, so we'll want to maintain a siltstone stockpile to keep our walls matching and pretty, but everything's pretty good tonight, man. How about you? We're in this for a long haul tonight. I'm planning to run past my usual time. Kind of want to get into some of the more advanced topics tonight, if I can get that far. Alright, now if we've done this right, we've marked some goods for trading. They'll be brought to the depot here by whatever dwarves aren't doing anything else, and our broker will then come and be able to trade. So right now, if you query the building, our broker is currently storing an item in a stockpile. But once he's finished with that, he'll go on and help move things to the depot. And once everything's been moved to the depot, then you can conduct your trade. Ideally, you want to do that as quickly as possible. It's possible for your broker to suddenly go on break or get hungry, thirsty, or tired. The elves will only wait for so long, and that's true of all caravans. Yeah, see, I have absolutely no problem with slow lead poisoning your elves, if that's really what you want to do. You won't find me trying to go to war with them, at least not initially, simply because I want to try and trade for some of the exotic animals that typically only the elves have access to. So again, now our broker has decided that now's a good time to take a nap, so we got to wait on our broker to wake up. When your broker becomes active and actually goes to trade, they'll stand in the center square, so you can kind of monitor that to see whether they're on site yet or not. That abort message there was us canceling our trap components because we've moved, or canceling our trap because we moved the trap components as part of that weapon bin up here. And we have to tell our broker to come to the depot. So now our depot is got its items in it. Our broker's going to come running and stand there to trade. Go. So they're right there in the middle, and you'll notice that I don't know what the prices are. This person didn't gain enough skill appraising all the items that are available for us to sell or them to buy to gain an actual skill point. So we're kind of going on feel, if you will. Blocks are about 5 per unit, unless they're made out of some special metal, for example. We don't want to sell the wood. The bronze warhammers are worth a couple of hundred. Same with the picks. And we can use that to kind of gauge what we're after here. So let's see, fire clay is cheap. I don't want to make anything out of clay. Looks like these are just empty cages. Yay for that, but I'd really like to have the animals now, please. So actually, unless maybe Toadie's changed it, I suppose it's possible these are all full of animals and my low appraiser can't look at them until I look at them manually. No, they're just grown hazelwood. The elves actually grow their furniture, so they grow a cage, for example, right off the side of the tree, basically, which is why they hate it when you cut your trees down and make things out of them. Really? Well, that's probably a bug, because it should be possible to effectively go to war with whatever species you care to. And you should still be able to torque off the merchants. If that's happening to you, is this a fortress you carried forward from 4004, or is this a fortress you started in the current version? Because although save games don't corrupt, sometimes there's something off with the way for a game it was handled in a prior version, and it won't invalidate the save, but it can cause weirdness. I can see if you start it in the current version, it's possible it's a bug and Toadie just hasn't fixed it yet. You could check the Mantis. I haven't looked. I haven't tried to go to war with anything yet, but we have been attacked by goblins, so I know they're not extinct, at least unless those were the only ones in the world. So we're in good shape there. But the only other thing I can think of, it could be different human civilizations. Have you checked that? Different elven civilizations? I mean, pissing one off doesn't necessarily piss them all off. fruit shouldn't be too expensive. This is food, basically, so let's just go ahead and buy our food here. And let's see if they've got anything else we really care about. Chances are good that for the elves, if they don't have animals and they didn't bring wood that year, then they really don't usually have much I care about. They'll bring cloth later. When they do, we'll be interested in buying as much cloth as they can hand us, pretty much, because we'll make it into clothing for our dwarves. But for what they've brought us, I can pretty well go down my blocks here and just sell off some of these blocks that I really don't care too much about. And we should be able to offset the few items that we've decided to buy here, because they're just not worth that much. And that should be plenty. And he says, nah, but we'll go this high. And let's see, he wants a copper mace and some blocks. Wow, dude. Ballsy. Okay, well, if you want the copper mace, then I'll also take the hazelwood cage and the plain willow cage, too. How about that? There we go. And he probably got a hell of a deal because he took that copper mace. Now, you do have to watch, like, for example, this bronze warhammer didn't come from our fort, so it's possible it had wood as well. See? Menaces with spikes of finely crafted lime wood. So this had wood in it. If we had tried to sell this bronze warhammer, they would have gotten pissed because of the decorations. Okay, so here's the problem you're running into with the Goblin King, basically. Currently, in the current version, and I think Toadie's going to have to do something about this to stop it, but currently in the current version, if you start a world and there's one dwarf civ, what will often happen is immediately after the world gen starts, you'll get an invasion from the goblins, for example. And in the current version, as I understand what I've read, the attacker always wins. There's no real battle resolution happening in the background. Or rather, the battles are automatically resolving in favor of the attacker. And so they'll basically attack the dwarven civilization early before it spreads out. And once they do, they automatically win, they take over, and you end up with a dwarven civilization that's basically just a goblin civilization in disguise. That's what you're running into, and there's been a talk in the World Gen thread on the Bay 12 forums that I've caught that specifically points to either forgotten beasts moving into your mountain home or goblins invading early on and wiping out your civ, basically. Either leaving you with a world you can't play or leaving you with your king basically arriving in like the first month, or other real problem sorts of embarks, like what you're describing with a goblin who you can't assign rooms to even though he's your king. So Toadie's going to have to go back and look at how he's got races handled. I mean, hypothetically, if you're going to have us playing a fort in this world and goblins can take over our kingdoms, then we need to be able to treat them either like a dwarven king or get them, assassinated and reassign them once they arrive. My guess is that'll get fixed in one of the versions coming up. And if Toadie feels it's at a good point, he'll leave it that way for the current version, which will cause all kinds of hell with generating worlds. But realistically, they don't have a whole lot here for the elves that want to buy, so we're pretty well done with them. So we'll tell our broker they're done, and since they're done, we can now give them something else to do. So right now I don't have gems set up for anybody, so I'm going to have my broker do some hauling jobs while we wait. And it looks like we're starting to bring the wood in now. Hopefully we'll get, see what time is it? It's early spring, so hopefully we'll get another. Let's check to make sure our lever's hooked up. Did we actually hook up our lever? We have not. Our lever is not hooked up to anything, so we need to do that now. So we link the lever to the bridge, we throw a couple mechanisms at it. Somebody will come along here in a moment and take that job to link the two up. There. See, that job's being done now. So somebody's going to come along and drag mechanisms into place and link the two so we can actually close our bridge instead of leaving it open. Yeah, see, that's the problem. If there's no goblin invasions, what's the point? I guess you could embark next to a tower and get the necromancers to come and siege you on a regular basis, but that's pretty much your only other option, I think. You can install masterwork, obviously. Okay, let's see. We built our metalworking area. It's got its uh, stuff stored. Did we ever get a furniture stockpile up? I don't think we actually built one of those, did we? We need to do that. We need to have some place to stick our excess furniture. Beds, bins, barrels, bags, whatever. Not hearing the usual sounds I would hear with so I'm wondering if my dwarves are training properly. Or it could be that I have my volume down too low, too. Typically, I create a new fortress if I'm starting a new stream. Now, generally speaking, I'll run it for a few years on camera. How long I run one is just up to how long it is before I decide I've had enough of whatever I do and go create something new. I play for myself offline, so the stuff I'm showing on stream is really just to demonstrate or to teach. This is tutorial night for version 40.05. I've streamed it 3 times. This is the 3rd time. We started on Monday. Monday, Wednesday, Friday. So we're about, call it, 9 hours into a fortress. Oh, I do this, I'll do this to show how to build wells, and we haven't got to wells because I haven't started building one yet. I was worried about getting the walls up. So that's our other thing we haven't done yet. Har, har, har. Okay, so our hospital is right up here under the surface. And typically, I like to build my wells adjacent to my hospital, at least one well adjacent to my hospital, because your hospital will use water for plaster casts. So bear with me a second while I'm doing some designations here, and I'll show you how I build wells and why. Actually, not sure how tree roots behave, so let me back that up just a hair here. Okay, so what I'm basically digging here is a pathway where water will flow in from the river, down through our channel, down through this pipe, down through this staircase, down this staircase to the bottom, across a couple of squares, and then back up through that. And the water will flow at pressure. And so for those of you who haven't done wells before, here's how you're going to do a well that will fill with water automatically so you don't have to monitor it, keep enemies out, and not flood your fortress. Okay, the three things you absolutely have to have from an indoor well. Water flowing in is under pressure. So basically, the river will try to spread out on the floor it's on. So Z level -1 here, or -2. And it'll try to spread out on this floor, and if it drops down through something, it will try to flood back up to the level below which it spread out. So it will try to flood back up to -3 here. What we want to do is make sure that the water that flows down through our channel doesn't come flooding up out of our well because it's under pressure. And so the water that floods in will go through our U-bend, which I'll get to in a minute, and come back up the other side. And actually, I'm going to raise the right-hand side of this U-bend while I'm thinking about it. And hit this little diamond-shaped configuration right here, which is a pressure regulator. And basically, water, when it moves through a diagonal, becomes repressurized at the floor it's on. So this is as high as the water will rise once the water moves from the right-hand side to the left-hand side. Now, if I were to do something silly like dig into the wall and tunnel my way into this staircase, the water coming into the staircase is still under pressure, so it would immediately flood out here and then flood upwards through my fortress. But the water on this side of the pressure regulator is pressurized only this floor. So if I did something stupid and dug straight into my well from here, then it would only flood as high as this level. It wouldn't try to rise above it, because the water has had its pressure reduced by this configuration. Now, if you're digging your wells for the first time, I strongly, strongly, strongly urge you to go out to the wiki and read the article on pressure and understand how it works. Ah, see, now we've hit an engineering problem because I've got a tunnel that I dug right here that would sever us off. So we want to change that here in a second. We'll have to wall that area up in order to dig our water pipe through there. Alright, now the only reason I'm doing this is just for my sake, so I remember which end is the in and which end is the out, in case I get confused in a hurry. No, I have not explained why I use stairs, and it's an excellent question. And the answer is tree growth. Now, I don't know that it's actually a problem in the current version. This is mostly a habit that I've carried over from V34 that may not even be necessary anymore in the current version. But basically, saplings permit water to flow through them, so that's fine. You can have saplings growing in your water pipes all day long, twice on Sunday, and never have a problem. But the moment they sprout into trees, trees block water. Now, with the current version, trees all being these giant monstrosities on the surface and underground, full-size trees shouldn't be able to grow in my pipes. I don't believe it's going to be possible. However, I don't want to run the risk that for whatever reason there's a bug or a problem and a tree trunk sprouts even though it can't possibly grow in this area. So we'll use the stairs to prevent saplings from growing in the first place, and that will basically keep my water pipes unclogged. Now my guess is in the current version, my untested assumption, is that in the current version we will end up with a situation where it's not really important anymore to do this thing. I'm just doing it out of habit. And I freely acknowledge that this may not even be necessary anymore. You will still have to connect the water, obviously. Stairs may not be necessary. So we'll throw up a wall here and a wall here, and we'll make sure that our dwarves do not stand on this side of this wall or this side of that wall when we're doing it. So what I'm doing here, by building this excess wall that I'm actually going to build, so I'm going to have somebody build this wall here, because I know I want that one. And they will stand in this square, because when they build this wall, or in one of the staircases, which is either one, fine, because they won't stand on this construction waiting to be built. So this little trick here will keep the dwarf on the left-hand side of the wall when he builds it, instead of allowing him to stand on the wrong side of the wall. You still have to leave them a place to stand, or that won't work. But as long as we've got it set up this way, our dwarf, and see, now our stone sense has told us we've discovered 10 mineral deposits inside the old achievements. Keep in mind, like I said, those aren't actually gameplay affecting, they're just little notifications, basically. Oh, look at there, Toadie's done changed the rules on us again. That dwarf should not have stood on that side of the wall. So maybe when he fixed the dwarves no longer stand on a construction problem, he didn't fix the dwarves will now wall themselves in because they don't care about... Damn it. That's actually a problem because it makes walling spaces up a more painful process. Now, truthfully, I don't actually even need that wall. I just need the other one because that's a dead end and it doesn't matter if it fills up with water. And it looks like they're connecting the well from both ends. That's good. So now they'll dig up through the earth if they haven't already. Yes, they're going up now. And I want to cut that tree right there on the edge of the water because I want to get rid of those roots. Let's see if somebody's got wood cutting as a skill here. They're going to go do that tree. Doesn't look like I've got somebody idle who will do it. So let's look and see who's idle and what we can have them doing. We'll tell our group to do it real fast. This could never go wrong, right? He'll grab an axe and go cut his own tree for a change. Well, I don't know that that's a goof. Maybe that's what he intended all along. So I hesitate to call it a bug because the trick of getting your dwarves to stand where you wanted them to was a nice workaround for another problem. You'd think the dwarves would be smart enough to check to see if they have a path back to home before they wall themselves in, but... And apparently this cave goes right to the bottom of the world because we just discovered ourselves some raw adamantine. Where was it? Right there. So we've already discovered adamantine. We haven't even started making steel yet. So this must be Cavern 3. Because I don't think I would normally get... I would normally hit Cavern 2 on the way down, at least in theory. So there's one... Looks like I've only hit 2 of the 3 caverns. One right there, and then one a little further down. So maybe I missed Cavern 2. And because we've increased the number... I think... No, on this fort we didn't increase the number of levels. So what we'll have to do is we'll have to mine out these little strands that stick out the sides. Those are safe. So these 2 squares are safe. This is safe. And then we'll have to employ a very slow process of laboriously extracting the adamantine from this area. we'll have to secure and wall off a chunk of cavern in order to be able to get to it reliably. Now, it looks like it might conceivably go up as high as this floor. So let's see if we can't dig over a little bit and find it. With any luck, that'll actually be adamantine we dig into. Yeah, see, I like the open caverns. I don't like those little tight, narrow corridors. And the truth is, I don't know if the openness settings even have as much effect as you might like in the modern era, because trees changed, and Toady may very well have changed how the caverns work. If your cistern is muddy, it's because it's only one floor deep. Make it deeper. That's the way to fix it.
Sir, you can't do that there.
Yeah, we've got fun turned on. You needn't worry about that. So, raw adamantine, boys and girls, that's solid tube we're digging into up here. Raw adamantine. Ta-da! I'm gonna leave it alone for right now. I don't want to mess with it right now. And that's actually outside the walls of our fort because of the way we dug into the caverns. So that spot actually comes up outside our walls. So we're not ready to do any serious extracting just yet. Basically, if the bucket drops into a cistern and the depth of the water is 1 Z level, 7 of 7, it will come up as mud-laced water. If your well is deeper than that, and ours is, so see, I'm going to put the well here, and it is 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 levels deep. The water will only go down as far as the first floor, where there's no water and there's no mud in that first tile below. It's not that the water always makes mud, it's that if it... Are you talking about the mud just being on the bottom of your well? That's normal. If you're talking about the water in the bucket coming up as mud-laced water, yeah, that's the other reason why we immediately cut back our trees. And built a setback to keep them even further away from our fort. We're actually going to pave over. Everything we dig out on this floor is going to get paved over on the surface. Or stockpiled over or cut down immediately, because I don't want to run the risk that trees are holding up pieces of other trees and we get a collapse. Yeah, if your well is only 1 Z level deep, you will get mud-laced water, so always make your wells a little deeper than that. 2 levels is sufficient. If you're playing in V34 or earlier, you need to watch out that a tree could conceivably grow at the bottom of your well, which would then have mud at the top of the tree, which would make your well 1 Z level shorter than it was before, basically. And so if your well was 2 levels deep and you had a tree grow at the bottom, now you're going to be back to getting mud-laced water, and you have to find a way to cut the tree down to prevent it. So you either have to drain the well or dig a new one. Or you could build your well at least 3 levels deep and you're fine. 6 is more than sufficient even in the current version. We're not going to get any trees that grow that deep in that tight a space. So we'll be good. Now that just gets us the actual well. That doesn't actually hook us up to the water. So that's the next thing we got to do. I got to finish this little chunk that we put off because I was worried about how digging into the roots would affect, you know, potential collapse, etc. And someone will come along here momentarily and build that wall. And we need to make sure we've got a grate, which we don't have any of. So now we need to go to our mason and say, hey, dude, we need a grate. We need a grate now. And we only need one, but I'm going to have him make a few just so that we get some backups. Quality won't matter much here. We're going to be dealing with a grate that our dwarves will never see once it's installed. Now this lever, if you hit T to see the objects inside it, is clearly linked to something. There's two mechanisms. There's one for the actual building, and then there's a second one for what it's linked to. Now I happen to know that this was linked to our bridge because I set the job up just a minute ago. But if I was going to ever come back to this fort later, I might not remember which lever did what thing. Capital N will get you into the notes menu, and I strongly recommend if you're playing the vanilla version that you take notes and actually mark down what your levers do. So we're going to mark this one opens our surface keep bridge. And there's a drop warning because it could drop one of our dwarves or other critters off the bridge when we close it. There's a crush warning because it could conceivably crush dwarves if they happen to be standing in the wrong place when the bridge goes up. So this is I need to be aware of what this is doing because it could potentially harm my dwarves. Now we'll name that, so this is the keep bridge lever. And now I know when I pull that what it's going to do. If I really wanted to be, retentive about it, I could put a note here and hit place and call this one the keep bridge. And I could use that as part of a patrol route, and it would identify this area for me if I needed to come back to it later. So I've given it a name, now I know where it is and I'll remember it. Got to move the new puppies into the storage zone. I don't want them on the front lines. I want them to have a chance to grow up and become dogs that will actually defend my fortress, not puppies that will simply bark at everything. He's probably picking up wood. If I left wood down there, yeah, that's what I've done. So there's no ramps. He has to go all the way around to get to this. There's nowhere for him to come into the pit except at the back end. So basically he has to go all the way around the trench to go back down in. Now, I really don't want that, so the next thing we're going to do is, temporarily at least, I'm going to forbid all of the wood in the trench. When we've got more labor, we'll come back and we may reclaim it. But for right now, I don't want anybody going down in here repeatedly to pick this up. This is going to be a lot of labor back and forth, all that walking, all that schlepping at their tender age. So we're going to go ahead and disable this so that they don't try to actually do that job. With those forbidden, they are effectively taboo. My dwarves will ignore them as though they do not exist.
Another baby? Well, at least it's not an explosion of cats.
Okay, that's just our broker. We don't care about the broker. And that's a hauler. We don't care about the hauler. That's good. What we don't want is our military dwarves giving birth. If that happens, we have to immediately pull them out of the squad. We don't want them on the front lines with an infant. That ends poorly. Okay. Now, we didn't connect this directly to the river, you notice. I kind of dug it back from that just a hair. And the reason is because we'll actually make the connection from above. We'll dig it out from up here. One thing I do want to do is I kind of want to expand this just a hair here. That'll just provide a little more flow into the pipe at the top end. Okay, now they'll dig that out, and while they're busy with that, we can check on our wall. Our wall is built. That's good. We can drop down and look and say, oh, nope, we didn't get our grate built. So we'll build our grate. And now we can just let our grate be built, but we don't want to do that in this case because we still have dwarves on the other side of the grate, and they will be locked out. So we'll suspend that job as well. And now we'll take a peek and see if everybody's finished their digging. Digging is done, and as we go down through the pipe, is anybody in the pipe? Nope, looks good there. And we'll unsuspend this job so someone will come along and put the thing where it belongs. And we have a bunch of idlers, but nobody's doing the job yet. Let's see. Okay, so let's make somebody in furniture hauling here for just a minute. Now, anybody with no jobs that they could do will come along and somebody will move that thing. There we go. So now we've got a few jobs that are being done. Furniture that needed to be hauled that nobody was hauling. And our migrants have arrived. That's good. But it looks like only 2 of them, so not a big wave here. Oh, no, there's a third one. We got a few more. 4. Looks like we're going to have a decent-sized number that we can use, so we'll throw some of those into the military squad and get them training. Because we need to start picking our military and our trap design up soon. We need to start defending our fortress. Walls and bridges are nice, and we can wall ourselves up and we would be safe from anything but a flyer, but it's possible we'll run into a forgotten beast or something else, or the goblins will come on flying mounts and they'll just fly over the walls. The water, see, this is one of the weirdnesses of Dwarf Fortress. When you start talking about pressure, pressure can dead end. In the real world, you're not going to get that unless you use some kind of valve, basically. But the water doesn't have to drain anywhere. It basically just fills up that hole and stops. And that's all it'll do. It won't go anywhere. As the dwarves drink from it, water will flow back in. See, now this is basically, in the real world, this would not work this way. Just a simple piping system would not reduce pressure. Our well would flood big time. But in Dwarf Fortress, that pressure regulator system right there will prevent our well from actually overflowing, and it'll just fill up to a capacity and stop. Yeah, now if I ever wanted to drain it, I would have to provide some sort of outflow, and then, you know, maybe put a floodgate in front of it in order to stop it from just draining off. Or I would have to provide greater inflow than I provided outflow so that the backlog of water would do it. But then I'm going to run into the pressure problem again. Okay, so we've got our well dug. Is our grate in place yet? Our grate's in place. Nobody's in the pipes. Double check because we don't want to drown a dwarf in the middle of our well. That would be bad. Mark those areas right there for excavation. A miner will come along and we will have water flow and a well. And although it's not technically a well yet, it's basically just a hole in the floor. It's a water source, and it's better than no water source, which is what we have now. Dwarves would have to go to a muddy pond, for example, and that would be bad. You don't want the guy that washes your wounds to be picking water up at the local muddy pond. Well, let's see. The Were-Gila monster. So we've got a lycanthrope on the field. Let's see. Where's he at? He is all the way over there. It's going to be a race between our miners and him to get back inside, but we'll see what we can do. In the meantime, let's talk about burrows, because I haven't really discussed those yet. Burrows are a way to restrict what jobs your dwarves will do. A dwarf will assign to a burrow will only do jobs that are in the burrow. So this is an easy way to temporarily enable or disable jobs based on where that job is. Yeah, one of the walls wasn't done, but I don't care about that wall. That wall is going to dead end. That wall doesn't go anywhere. It's just a dead end. I was going to wall it off, and it really doesn't matter. I'll just leave it. That was where our dwarf stood. Toady apparently changed the rules because the dwarf didn't stand on the spot I wanted him to based on where the constructions were. He stood on a construction and built that. So here comes the water flooding in, and it'll flood down our pipe. Let's make sure everybody's good and indoors. What do you say here? Let's do a burrow. So we'll define the burrow. And basically I want my citizens restricted to jobs that are inside the walls. So we're going to do a cutout like this, and then we're going to temporarily erase a chunk of this. Because I don't want my citizens who are potentially vulnerable to be doing anything in the danger zone, if you will, of the entrance. I don't care about jobs just on the other side of that. I want to make sure that they're not doing anything out front, basically. And then we'll go below ground, and you have to make sure that you designate the entirety of the area you want. So we want to make sure we designate all of this as part of our burrow. So the dwarves will do farming jobs, or pasturing jobs, because if we don't, they'll stop doing all those jobs too. And we'll go down to about this floor, and then we'll go down one more, and on this floor we'll grab the corner. And I want them to do all jobs that are underground, all the way down as far as the first cave, which is right here. So we'll go to the bottom corner with that. And I want them to do all jobs in proximity of my fortress tube, down as far as this floor here. And I want to make sure that they'll do the jobs when I ask them to excavate I want them to be able to sleep in their own beds. So I'm going to make sure to add that section and this section to my burrow. And basically what I'm setting up is kind of like an order that says, if it's not inside these confines, I don't want you going near it. Won't actually stop them from going outside if the job they're doing involves, for example, grabbing something they need. But it will pull them indoors if they don't have jobs on the surface. And it will prevent them from starting new ones on the surface. Yeah, when you're doing burrows, if you look at the hotkeys, it'll say, if we're defining a burrow, it'll say currently painting. If you hit R, it'll say currently erasing. And that's the difference. You can change your brush size. Round 5x5, 3x3 square, 1 tile. You can do it by rectangles. So if I mouse brush this, I could... Yeah, keep in mind, guys, I'm kind of... When I say I'm starting to burrow, W to hit burrow, and then from there on you're in the menu. So I'm much about what the hotkeys are. You hit tab to get to hotkeys in case I forget to mention how I got to the burrows menu, for example. W is make burrows right here. It's not organized very well, but if you look through this list of items, that will get you to the main menus of whatever section it is. And tab will open up that hotkey list, if you will. Now, normally, and at least in prior versions, my werebeasts would have converted themselves back to something other than a werebeast and gone on their merry way by now, but it looks like this one's going to make a run for the pit. Nope, he got a woodcutter. Bummer. Woodcutter didn't get indoors fast enough, and they climbed down the wall and killed him. Woohoo! Not sure why he was down there, to be honest, because there was nothing down there that should have been done. Now, with everybody indoors, everybody, other than the stupid woodcutter, who I'm not sure why he was out there, but okay. Oh, I didn't assign everybody to the burrow. That's my problem. No! So under this, we'll add a burrow, and we'll call it Red Alert. Because why not, right? Oops. And we'll restrict all our civs to that burrow, which will cause them immediately to run for cover, which is what I wanted to do originally, and they weren't. Not that it mattered, that guy would not have escaped. And it looks like... Let's see, where's our were-Gila monster at now? He's coming around the north side. And I think everybody's going to escape into the hole before he gets there. We might lose that guy carrying the bin because he's slow. Oh, no, there he transformed back to his normal dwarven form and took off. So we're done with our werebeast at this point. He'll flee the map. Horrified and ashamed of his werebeast status, he will flee. And he'll path right off the edge, and he's done. But that does leave us with one dead woodcutter that we need to deal with, so let's go down to our mason's workshop and order ourselves up a coffin. And to be realistic, we really should order more than one, because, you know, dwarves. But we'll make sure we get a couple of these promoted so that they run to the top. And then once that's done, we'll open up the tomb area of our fort. Typically, right off the dining room is where I'll dig another section that looks just like my lever complex, only instead of levers, we'll store coffins and slabs. So this will be coffins and slabs territory down here. And that'll give us plenty of coffin space for our first few dwarves anyway. And if I need more later, I can always expand that. So, no, not undead buzzards. Oh, yeah, you did. Ha! Awesome. We've got a necromancer who came to visit with his undead, and no announcement that bad things were coming to the fort. Fantastic. Broken as hell. All the buzzard corpses are way up in the sky at the extreme northern end of the map. That's awesome. Buzzard corpses, boys and girls. The eagle has landed? Is that... never mind. And the necromancer who brought them has fled at this point. So he's left his buzzards all stranded on the map, it looks like, I hope. If they come to visit, there's not much I can do about them. I don't have any crossbows yet. In fact, let's look at our... No, that's migrant wave. That's the next thing. Because we just got migrants, didn't we? Yes, we did. Let's take a look at who came in this last wave. Hey, he's a hunter. He'll do it. He'll make a nice military dwarf. We'll temporarily set him as no profession. We'll make him into a military dwarf here momentarily. And we'll go to... we need to set all of these folks as haulers. Give them something to do. And then we need to set that one guy to nothing, because we're going to make a dwarf out of him. We're going to make a profession out of him. And then when we sort these guys by profession, all our haulers are in one place, ready to go. They'll grab wooden axes if I have wooden axes available. They'll grab metal axes if metal axes are available. So our haulers will kind of defend themselves a little bit. I wouldn't count on them as an actual defense force, but if they're attacked in melee, they will. And it looks like we've got somebody who came in who was already skilled at architecture, so we'll go ahead and appoint an architect, even though I really don't need somebody doing architecture right now. Oops, looks like my architect profession was broken. I didn't have architecture turned on. I'll turn it off for our stonecrafter here and anybody else who has it, so our architect is doing nothing but architecture. Alright, let's see. What else do we have that's of any interest here? Got 2 farmers, so we're doing good on the farming aspect. Glass maker, but we don't have magma yet. Clothes making. I don't have anybody doing clothes making yet, do I? No, I don't. So let's look at... He's a guy, so he's going into military. And we'll take these folks here, and... yeah, all 3. And we'll make you guys into Fletchers, which is my catch-all craftsman profession that handles tanning, because tanning is a mutable skill, and cloth making, and weaving, and bone carving, and wood crafting, and leather working, and most of these things I don't really care if they're masterwork. I really just care if they're done. Technically, having masterwork clothing is better than not, so if specializing your cloth worker wouldn't be a bad idea. Flyers will trigger traps if they go through a tunnel or something that forces them into the square where the trap is. The problem is that flyers don't have to fly through a trap if they can fly over a trap. Now that's weapon traps. That does not apply to pressure plates. I'm not sure if pressure plates apply to flyers at all. I definitely wouldn't count on it. And of course, the only dwarf who actually has hammer dwarf skill is female, and I don't want to appoint females into my military because of the whole kid thing. Let's see. I've got 8 male dwarves. I need 6, so I have to get rid of 2 who either have a useful skill or who have no combat skill, preferably. So let's go ahead and assign this guy to the squad, and this guy to the squad, and this guy to the squad, because they all have some military background of some sort, albeit not much. So we'll go ahead and get them added. And that brings us up to 7, and I need to add 3 more, and the only other guys who have anything in terms of military skill are all women. So now we'll go back over to labors and see who has what good labors we care about. It doesn't look like any of the guys. This one's a beekeeper, but I've got a female beekeeper here if I want one. This guy's got some dyeing skill, and that's about it. Everybody else, this guy's got gem setting. That's, I want to keep him. And this one's got clothes making, so this one needs to be a fletcher. So there we go. These two can get booted out, and the rest, and then I'm pretty good. All right, yeah. Now, let's go ahead and get this guy into something useful here. We'll make him a no-profession dwarf as well right now. Much nice as that level 2 woodcutting is, these guys are going to become the core of a new military squad. So we'll create a new custom profession from one of these dwarves. So I'll pick one, turn hauling on for them, because I want my military to do hauling if they're not doing anything else. I like pump operation if I'm looking for something else to add, because pump operation builds attributes like strength and endurance. So if I have any pumps, sometimes I'll even build what I call a dwarven gym. You'll throw some pumps down that aren't actually pumping anything, and you'll basically tell dwarves to start the pumps, and they'll go running, and they'll just sit there and pump until they're exhausted. We had one military dwarf at all, pretty much, that came in this wave, and that military dwarf was a hammer dwarf, but it's a female, and I'm not risking the dwarves all get killed when female hammer dwarf shields her body with her own infant and then goes berserk at the loss of her child. Yeah, I don't know. I haven't seen any sparring reports, and I note that these guys are they're starting to get their skills up. This guy won't spar with the others. He's too skilled. He's my squad leader. He should be doing demonstrations, at least in theory. So this is water skins and backpacks, and I normally don't mess with water skins and backpacks too much, but I don't care if my dwarves pick them up. These guys we need to get added to the squad, and hopefully they've got enough equipment to actually pick up equipment. So let's go ahead and get everybody added who we've now jumped into this profession. So everybody who's listed as that profession, I go ahead and add in. If they're not already in the squad, they'll be listed, and if they're already in the squad, they won't, so we don't have to worry about accidentally dropping somebody or shifting their positions around. And then what'll happen is all these folks who've been added to the military will go and get their training equipment, and they'll start doing training amongst themselves just like the others will. So we basically put them in the military full time. So they're trying to store the wood logs, and I've got them in the burrow, and it's spamming me down here. I can't store this item. And the reason is because the jobs try to get created, but they look for dwarves who can do them. And the dwarf will get selected, and then he'll go, nope, I'm in a burrow, can't do that, and he just won't store that item. And so all the wood is basically calling out to all the dwarves, come store us, and the burrow is saying, nope. So let's name our burrow. This is called Inside. I know it's real creative, but it's exactly what it is. This is basically inside my walls, inside the defenses. Outside that burrow is potentially dangerous. Inside that burrow is inside the walls. Now, I know there's some overlap here, but since my dwarves can't actually fly, I don't have to worry about the overlap in the air. And everything else, land-wise, is inside the walls, beyond the traps and beyond the entrance. So let's take a look at our military dwarves here. We've got them showing up for duty now. And they've picked up equipment, but there's a surfeit. We don't have many, we're short on metals, right? Or we were when we started to make some of these items, so we don't have everything we need yet for everybody. Everybody's got a hammer, so we can at least do weapon training. But there's a guy missing a shield, so no shield training for him. And several people have no armor or only partial armor, so they won't get the armor user skill the way we want them to either.
Sir, a baby's been born.
Oh, that's just great. Another mouth to feed.
So now if we look at our dwarves, I noticed that there's a lot of them going to combat training, which hopefully means that they're passing out the novice level skills that they've built, biting and so forth. And once they've done that, hopefully they'll start actually doing training amongst themselves. Double check my schedule, make sure I didn't screw up blunt language. Nope, they're good. Now, our smelters have hopefully been very busy in producing metal bars, but we didn't actually create a bar stockpile, so let's go downstairs and take a look at that. Not seeing any smelting actually get done here, and that's not good. Jobs are ready, right? Yeah, got the jobs, got the metal ore in the right place. Need to get the people to do the jobs. So, what's up here, folks? Did I not add the job to my haulers like I usually do? I did not. I was dumb. So, IR dumb, IR add furnace operation. Now I will have somebody operating my furnaces non-stop, because there will be 4 haulers available pretty much all the time to move stone into a smelter and get it made into bars. Once the iron is in bar form, then we can start cranking out some basic iron equipment, or we can look for flux to make steel. But early on, iron is sufficient for our purposes, and I haven't seen any flux yet. Our record keeper, we haven't actually given him an office to work in. I don't think we have a record keeper yet. But I haven't seen any of the things that the Phoebus tile set identifies as flux. And maybe flux further down. We haven't gone through the world yet. But all the way down into that base cavern we discovered earlier, I don't recall seeing the symbol for flux at any point along the way. So if there is any flux on our map, it's deep, and the lack of flux is going to be your primary restriction on making steel. You can always get the iron either by importing everything you can get that's made of iron and melting it all down, or smelting it all out. You can get plenty of iron. But what you can't get is flux stone. You can only order 4 of an item at a time because of a current trading limitation. And at least if it hasn't been fixed, I need to double check. Basically, flux is still the primary limiter on how much steel you can produce how quickly. So you'd be left with a slow import process where you're ordering flux from the caravan, picking up any spare you can get. Man, you laugh, but I've seen dwarves in combat logs do crazy stuff with their teeth. Tear off limbs. I would not let a dwarf bite me, let's put it that way. Okay, so let's go floor by floor through our fort and review what we haven't done yet. Our military is training, but they need to be equipped. Our trap hallway is woefully insufficient for any kind of significant encounter. This might stop a small squad, but it's not going to stop a siege. We've got a bunch of furniture up here that needs to be stored. We've got some items in our catch-all stockpile that we got from the first caravan that haven't been stored. And our wood stockpile needs to be filled. Now, the wood stockpile being filled, the only thing I can do with that is just add more labor. As we go down, our birds need nest boxes. We've got at least one kitchen that hasn't been constructed yet, so I need to make sure somebody's got the cooking labor so we can get that done. We haven't built any surface farms. I need to do that, and I'll show you how to farm surface crops underground in case you want to build them in a safer environment than on the surface. Let's see, as we go down, we haven't yet built our mist generator for the dining room. We need to get a coffin built. We haven't done that. We need to do that now because not building coffins is a really bad idea. Dwarves get very unhappy if they're forced to let their friends and relatives rot, basically, and burial has a small positive effect to offset the death of a dwarf. By default, coffins are not enabled for burial. You'll need to turn that on. Make sure that the pet burial option is set the way you want it, because if you allow pets, it's possible for all your coffins to get filled with animal corpses and you not realize it. And my corpse is forbidden. That's correct. Because the first thing I did was actually forbid all of the death items and other artifacts that would result from a corpse. So my dwarves have just left it sitting there. They haven't even tried to go pick it up yet. And we want to make sure that all the parts get appropriately treated. So, that will get somebody then doing the burial labor, and we should see them coming out if I disabled the alert. Did I? Nope. Did now. And now they'll start refilling the wood stockpile and burying the corpse that's outside the walls. See, I see training session. Oh, I don't think I activated them, did I? No, I did. They're active, and they should be training. And the barracks is marked appropriately. They're training. They're just training sessions, and I don't think that's actually sparring. Now, what we should be seeing over here in Therapist, at least in theory, on the military tab, is the slow spread of these skills that dwarves know. So these guys who've learned a point of fighter will tend to teach it to these guys who don't have it. So these skills will spread out, and once they've spread out enough, you'll start to see them go, okay, we've got all our skills in, we should start training now. And they'll start sparring. But this will be a delay. Bringing a skilled military dwarf is something I'm doing in my current screw-around fortress. Horrified. Awesome. Emotional shock. Fantastic. So I guess we'll keep doing this until somebody can actually remember how to actually pick a corpse up and drag it to the burial site. I guess. There is a burial labor. It's literally called burial in Therapist. Burial, and it's turned on for my haulers and my military. Outside to the east. Yes, that is a chick. And it will eventually find its way inside, I hope. I think I set up a meeting zone. Did I not? Nope, didn't set up a meeting zone. Need to do that too. Awesome. So, meeting zone is where migrants and animals will attempt to go when they arrive in the caravan if they don't have anything else to do. So this is the regrouping zone, if you will, for your idle civilians and unpastured animals. They will migrate here. And typically my dining room is pretty much where I want them because it's going to be one of the nicest rooms in my fortress. It's going to have plenty of high quality furniture for them to stare at. There'll be other dwarves to talk to. This will help them, minimize sorts of problem situations that you can get into. It also means that if I bring them all together in one place and there's going to be a tantrum spiral, I can have military on hand to drag them away to cages or whatever before it really gets out of hand. Now, one thing we need to watch for is that all of our animals will go down there, including the ones who are grazers, and grazers won't survive downstairs because there's nothing for them to eat in the dining room. So we want to make sure we check through our list one more time for any grazers who haven't yet been assigned to our actual feeding area. So all the cavies and the reindeer and the puppy or the non-puppies things that have come. We can skip the birds, they're not grazers. We can skip the cats, they're not grazers. All of everything else looks like it's been assigned. So at this point everything that needs to graze is in the grazing zone. In our food stockpile area, we created a zone for cats. Cats will kill vermin, and the only vermin I really care about are the ones that I'm going to find in my area where my dwarves are coming to get food. So we'll pasture our kitten indoors, and then we need to go upstairs and put our birds in the bird area. So we're quickly getting these all assigned away. Now realistically that's a duckling and I'm not keeping it, so it's going to get butchered, but for right now I'll get it moved to where it belongs. So it's at least sorted. Okay, we'll go downstairs, we'll see if we've got any stone carvers in the fortress, and if we do, we'll have them make some rock items for us, starting with some rock nest boxes. Rock nest boxes are necessary for your birds to actually have a place to lay their eggs. Some other animals will use them, for example cave crocodiles, I believe, will need a nest box as well to lay their eggs. If you can actually tame cave crocodiles, I highly recommend it. They produce like 60 eggs in a clutch. You can literally swarm stuff with cave crocodiles, not to mention the fact that they're actually, dangerous in their own right. No. Once a tomb is selected for a body, it is that body's tomb. Their parts go in the same coffin. It's not like they'll spread him out over 3 coffins and you need to worry about that. And crafts-wise, I want rock mugs and rock pots for food storage. So the mugs are for trading, and the pots are for storing our items, basically. And we'll turn them on temporarily. Put that on repeat, and we'll turn on mugs. Put that on repeat. Now, this is one of those spots where I really like workflow because it would turn them off for us at some point in the future. But for right now, that'll do. Now, I do need to look in, because it doesn't look like I have much in the way of stoneworkers at the moment. We don't have much in the way of profitable types of industries that are actually making us money. So these guys here have some masonry skill, and that's really what I'm focusing on with the stoneworker. So we'll assign them to be stoneworkers. And that gets us up to 3, and I want a couple more because I want at least 5 in order to have some overlap with the stone crafting section. Or I could just assign people to stone crafting. But I have 4 stone masonry shops for making blocks, and I want to have at least 4 masons. So we're going to make 1 more. This person has a useful hauler skill. See if anybody has the actual attributes behind the scenes to make them a good choice for masonry here. Probably not, would be my guess. Awesome. Looking at their roles over on the right here, where it basically tells you what their attributes make them good at currently, what their skills make them good at currently. Since their skills are all fairly low, their attributes kind of dominate the relationship, if you will. Okay, so first off, the most crucial thing you need to know about flails is I don't even think you can make them. You have to import them, if I'm not mistaken. Look. See, these are the only types you can make. So for me personally, immediately I go for what I can make. That's the first characteristics. The only weapons I will realistically be able to compare for you are those that actually belong to dwarf kind. I believe Toady has implemented a fix for whips, which will modify how they are currently working to make them slightly less effective against armor, we at least hope. Generally speaking, maces are weaker versions of hammers. Short swords are weaker versions of spears, axes, and hammers, because they can do all those items. And the rest, a crossbow is both a missile weapon and a hammer, though worse than a warhammer or worse than a mace, if I'm not mistaken. And everything else works kind of on its own principles. So, crossbows are the only projectile weapon. They shoot things. Things die. Maces are blunt objects. There's several choices for that. Maces are worse than hammers. Short swords have an alternate attack where they hit something with the pommel of the weapon and bludgeon it. And as a blunt weapon, warhammers are the best choice. On your cutting side, you're looking at battle axes and swords. Swords are less effective at cutting things than battle axes. On your piercing attacks, you're looking at spears and swords, and spears are more effective at piercing things. Picks work like a very narrow battle axe, and use the mining skill instead of a weapon skill. It's tough to get people to use them as weapons, and because the mining skill replaces your uniforms. But if you can get them using picks, and they have the skill to do it, picks are incredibly lethal. They pierce really well, and they cut things very well. Bolts, of course, are just what the crossbow fires. When it comes to foreign weapons, in older versions, whips and scourges were absolutely lethal. Basically lightsabers. They would pierce armor like crazy. In the current version, I think that's been fixed, so I wouldn't rely on it. If I were making weapons, my first choice is what I can make. My second choice is what sorts of enemies I will be facing. Against the undead, I want crossbows, spears, and hammers, because they don't chop things into pieces, which can then be resurrected. So we want piercing and bludgeoning weapons, not cutting. So I would skip swords, and I would skip battle axes, and I would try to avoid using my picks in combat. Blunt weapons, your primary concern is how dense the metal you're using is, so silver hammers are really good. But when cutting weapons, you're looking at various edge characteristics that silver doesn't have. So iron and steel are better than silver for edged weapons. For cutting weapons, there's a basic order, and it's copper, bronze, iron, steel, adamantine is the basic order. Copper can be used for armor. It's terrible. Copper can be used for blunt weapons. It's actually reasonably good because it's fairly dense. Copper can be used for cutting weapons, but it's terrible. As you move up to bronze, everything gets better with bronze across the board. As you move up to iron, again, everything is better with iron, more or less. There are arguable cases like with blunt weapons where bronze might potentially work better, but it's going to be a relatively minor difference that you're probably not going to care about. If you're making things out of iron, you might as well make it all out of iron. When you move up to steel, most things get better. I'd be curious about blunt weapons because I think the iron is more dense, but I'd have to look. Edged weapons, steel gets better across the board. Piercing weapons, steel. And as you move up to adamantine, then there's some really weird stuff that goes on. Adamantine is absolutely worthless for bolts, for blunt weapons, but it makes the best spears, short swords, and battle axes imaginable. These things cut everything like butter. But the only hammer or blunt weapon you should ever make out of adamantine is the one you're going to give to your Justice Dwarf who administers your beatings, because it's like beating somebody with a styrofoam mallet. Adamantine is so light that it just does no damage as a blunt weapon, and since the weight of an object, for like a bolt, when it's in flight, is a big characteristic of how much damage it does, bolts have that same problem. And this would also affect cutting weapons, except that adamantine actually has basically an armor divisor. Basically, it cuts through things better. Its edge characteristics are just out of this world in terms of how sharp it is. So it will slice through things like crazy, but as a blunt weapon, it's just miserable. And truthfully, when it comes to armor, I'd go with steel for most things, and there are a few things that adamantine can do well. I think breastplates, if I recall correctly, work pretty good. But adamantine is so light that things that resist blunt objects will do so with their weight. And so, for example, your breastplates that you might make out of adamantine, you're probably better off making out of steel because the blunt objects that are going to hit them, you want to absorb as much of that as possible. Adamantine is terribly light. So you start to get into almost a miniature physics lesson, if you will, when you start talking about weapon types and what the advantages and disadvantages are. Blunt weapons will tend to go through armor better, because armor basically, unless it's been changed, armor basically just doesn't stop them effectively. The blunt impact goes through. Cutting weapons will perform better against unarmored targets that can be killed by severing things, for example, limbs. And realistically, axes are really useful tool against things that are made out of heavy metals. For example, a bronze colossus or a forgotten beast made out of steel. You're probably going to want to try and sever limbs wherever possible, because blunt objects aren't going to hurt that thing very much. For things that can bleed, like big things, big beasts, spears are actually a fairly good choice, because they will pierce the enemy and cause it to bleed out as long as it's got blood. If it doesn't have blood, spears are not particularly useful. Crossbow bolts work kind of like spears for the most part, but frankly, you're probably going to assign your archer dwarves to stay back anyway, so firing the extra bolts doesn't hurt anything. There's no friendly fire. And yeah, silver and platinum are fantastic blunt object weapons, but platinum is not a weapon, or is not a choice you get by default, and silver is really only good for blunt weapons. Well, or making gewgaws out of to pretty up your fortress, which is something we're going to have to discuss at some point, probably in the reasonably near future. Let's take a look at happiness here for a second, review how our dwarves are doing in that category. So, most of our dwarves are doing okay. There's a couple of, hey, I'm kind of pissed off about you putting me in the military. This guy lost a spouse, so he's kind of unhappy about that. We need to get that spouse buried. So our woodcutter was married to this person. Might have been the one that got horrified for the burial, too, so... And now if we query it, you can see this is the resting place of that woodcutter that died in the Gila monster attack. And the corpse is still sitting there, so although it's been marked, nobody's actually come and done the damn burial labor yet. Burial is one of those things, if I'm doing burial, I really don't care who does it. So everybody can do it, and whoever's idle will come do it. Now, keep in mind, you want to make sure your good dwarves aren't wandering around outside, so you only want to do this when you reasonably believe that it's safe to do. I still see training session across the board here. I'm getting skill spreads. Yeah, we're getting a little broader here. Starting to get more skills spread out. Okay, now these two guys mark no profession. I'm going to actually make them military dwarves as well. They're going to have all these skills here. And we're actually going to assign them hunting and butchery. And I don't think I gave myself a labor or a custom profession for that one yet. Yes, I did. Okay, good. Let's see if it works. We're going to temporarily set these guys to be hunters. Now, you need to watch out with hunters around undead and necromancers, but it looks like in the current version, necromancers are pretty much broken because that dude wandered on the map friendly and then wandered off when his undead scared him, I'm assuming. So, since that's broken, we don't have to worry about him coming around and resurrecting our refuse pile or resurrecting the hunter's kills. Giving our hunters hunting will allow them to build up their archer and march dwarf skills, which they will use as militia dwarves. So this doubles up as military training for hunting. Food and refuse are for hauling corpses and food items. Animal hauling is so that I've got them doing animal training, and the reason is because I occasionally will assign hunters animals in order to help them in a fight. Occasionally you'll get situations where the dogs will attack an ambush squad, and the archer will be able to put 2 or 3 of them down, and they'll rout before the squad overwhelms them. But that typically doesn't happen with low skill hunters. They need a bit of skill built up before that'll happen. So we need a crossbow, quiver, and ammunition for both of these guys if we don't already have it. So let's take a look and see what we got. I don't believe we made a crossbow at all. We haven't touched crossbows yet. But we did make a bowyer workshop in that first episode, I think. So we're going to go ahead and make some wooden crossbows here. I'm going to make 10 of them, even though I don't have 10 dwarves. Wooden crossbows are reasonably terrible as hammers. They're kind of light and flimsy. They don't, hammer as well as a metal crossbow. But frankly, if my military dwarves are hammering something at this stage of the game, we're probably got bigger problems anyway. So giving them some wooden crossbows is great, because all I really care about is whether they can fire bolts or not. Now we got a lot of idlers, so let's take a look and see who's really idle here. It looks like it may be counting our... because I don't see 15 guys with no job. I only see a handful. I don't think it's 15. It's more like... well, maybe 12? No, there's no way. That's not 12. Or not 15. Yeah, not 15. 3 and 3 is 6, and 2 is 8, and 5 is... oh, there's 2 down here. There we go. So there's our 15. Good. At least that's not broken. Our architect has no job because we have nothing for architecture. Our farmer has no job because we have nothing to plant. Our Fletchers don't have any buildings built for their workflow, basically. Our ceramics guys are the same way. Mad Doc has nobody injured to tend to. Our mine workers need to dig out some space, and our carpenter is should be making crossbows. Who's making the crossbows? Oh, our Fletchers are making the crossbows. That's fine because our woodworker doesn't have any skill in it anyway. In fact, if he's got the job, I'll go ahead and turn it off and turn off woodcutting for him because I don't want him outside the walls anymore. Got woodcutters to do that now. All right. So somebody's got our crossbows. We need to get some wood crafting and bone crafting done, making bolts for our crossbows. So we'll go downstairs to our Crafts Dwarf's workshop, which is upstairs from where we were, and we'll make sure that we add to at least one of these things. Let's clear out one of these so it doesn't have any jobs, and add wood bolts on repeat, and add bone bolts on repeat. Now, wood as bolts is not particularly effective, and bone is not much better. But typically with your crossbows, if you're really worried about effectiveness, you're going to have one military squad assigned something like copper bolts or iron bolts, and you're going to have a bunch of dwarves who are using wood or bone who you just don't care about. Whatever they're firing is good with you. Especially when your dwarves are low skill and they won't hit the target very often. I really want to make sure that I have bolts I don't really care about, and wooden and bone bolts work really well for just spamming. If you've got your civilians all equipped to do militia work, if you assign them to a squad, even if you never send them to train, and you give them all crossbows, everybody in your fortress basically is carrying a gun at that point. Now, they may not be very good with it, but they're at least carrying one, which means that in the event that they're attacked, they'll at least defend themselves. Sometimes that's good, sometimes it's bad. A single dwarf by himself trying to defend himself against a squad is probably going to get taken down, whereas if he weren't in the military, he might conceivably flee and save himself. I do use the manager, but primarily I use the manager for place item in tomb. Horrified! Everybody's going to be too afraid to bury the corpse, and we're going to have... our game is going to be broken by a corpse that we can't bury. Fantastic. I need to see if there's been an update to Therapist and see if the new version contains the discipline skill. Let me double check that real fast. Well, if you guys don't mind, I want to see if Therapist is updated real fast. Let's see if I can find Fork, because this is the old version. Current version out there is listed as version 22, according to their website. Oh, that's version 3411. That's not what I want. 23.3. Which we're on and doesn't mention the discipline skill. Awesome. So I can't actually see who would not get horrified to bury my corpses, unless I do it the long way. Oh yeah, rest assured, picks are absolutely brutal for combat. The problem is that you can't give them the mining skill, because if you do, that the mining labor overwrites the uniform that they have for the military, so they'll take all their military equipment off. Then you have to have two picks for everybody, one to use as a civilian pick, and then another pick to use as a military pick, because, you know, there's a big difference between the two. Picks are brutal in combat. They're basically like spears and battle axes put together. Now, I do use managers early. Like right now, I have a manager, but it's not actually doing any management. It's just I'm using him for the profile on my workshops. Eventually, I'll do it. If I'm playing vanilla, I'll start the manager up in order to queue jobs of a certain quantity up. I need 200 roasts made. I'll, you know, make 200 roasts. I'll put 200 roast jobs in and get them built. That way, I know that I'm not overflowing things. For example, putting mugs on repeat like I did. That you tend to overflow. Basically, you get all these mugs stacked up, and your guy just keeps making more mugs and making more mugs, and he doesn't stop. Now, in addition to our bolts and our crossbows, we also need quivers, and we don't have quivers yet. And I need a place to put those, and I'm going to put them here because I don't have any place else to put them, pretty much. And for cloth making, you need a few things: a loom. For leatherworking, you need a tanner's workshop. And in our case, it really doesn't matter what we make these out of. So graphite blocks and kimberlite blocks that I've got a couple of, I'm going to make those items out of those so that they just use up that single block. And it'll be gone that way, and I won't have it in my inventory. You need looms to spin thread into cloth, and then the cloth workers' workshop will make the cloth into usable items. Tanning workshops take skins and make leather out of them, and then the leather can be converted into items via the leatherworking workshop. So we'll build looms because we don't have any place converting thread yet, and then we'll go back and we'll build clothing workshops and leather workshops, and this floor will basically become a combination of workspace for the workshops and storage space for the same stockpile. So this will hold all of our cloth and all of our leather. At least to start. If we run out because we've got too much cloth and leather, then we'll come back and revisit additional space if needed. But this should be enough for pretty much everything we're going to do. And as a last thing, we'll have it take from the stockpile in case there was wood or in case there was leather or cloth in the caravan we sacked. And give me a sec, guys. Let me step AFK for just a second. Alright, so now we've got our stockpile set. We'll set it to take bins because both leather and cloth can be stored in bins. and we'll get people coming down to build those workshops to actually allow us to do cloth production. Now, cloth is important. It is vital for a fortress to have cloth. At some point, you're going to need it. The question is whether you import it or whether you make it yourself on site. But either way, you are going to need cloth because you got to clothe your dwarves. Naked dwarves go insane. So you got to make sure you've got clothing, and you got to build it up before you need it. You don't need an enormous cloth industry. Remember, your dwarves are going to wear their items for a while before they wear out. But once you've got 300 dwarves and their clothing wearing out every couple of years, you're going to need to have a pretty good throughput of cloth material. Cloth can be imported en masse from most caravans. They tend to bring lots of cloth. Silk is sometimes hard to come by. The Dwarven caravan will bring it, and you can find it in the caverns. But the methods of farming it are a little advanced for this tutorial. We might get them if I happen to get lucky and find the right thing I need, but realistically speaking, we probably won't be farming silk in this fortress. Wool, yarn can come from llamas and sheep, which you can bring with you. I brought sheep in this case. We actually have some sheep that are on this in our pasture area upstairs. We can shear them to get the wool we need and spin that into thread and make it into cloth. But early on, we don't have enough sheep really to bring. We don't have enough embark points with the default number to bring enough sheep to immediately allow us to go into a wool industry. That won't come until later. For plant cloth, however, we can produce en masse from pretty much the first summer. Pigtails, which are made into thread, which is made into cloth, you can bring with you, and you can plant them in your farms. And as you recall, when I first set up our farms, that was one of the first crops I started planting, and we just cranked out the pigtails. So sweet pods this season because we're in spring, but next season we're going to start planting. Looks like maybe I didn't even set this one up. Let's double check our farms and make sure they're all configured correctly here. Farm helmets year round. Quarry bushes and dimple cups. Sweet pods, pigtails, and dimple cups. It doesn't look like I set this one up, or I canceled it at some point. And it looks like I canceled it. Shame on me. Shame, shame. We gotta fix that. So pigtails on the seasons they can be grown, and dimple cups on the seasons they can be grown. And that will get us lots of cloth, lots of pigtails, and we'll make some into thread, and we'll brew some of them, but the net result will be that our cloth stockpiles will increase. Now let's talk about record keepers and other minor nobles that you appoint. I'm going to go ahead and give my record keeper his first office, and there it is. It's just going to be a chair, basically, sitting in a little niche in a back corner of nowhere, and that's his office. He'll come and sit on the chair and take notes. And that'll be how he keeps track of all the items in our fortress. The Psychic Dwarven Inventory. It is a single square room which will be assigned to one dwarf here in just a moment once I actually appoint a bookkeeper. Now, one of the things I want to address is you have to turn the settings up on your bookkeeper. I want my bookkeeper to keep my accounts completely accurate. That will take a lot of time, so he won't have time to do much other than bookkeeping. But he will be able to keep our accounts accurate if that's all he's doing. And then I need to replace him with somebody who hopefully has the skill, if anybody, and likely not if you haven't appointed someone to do it, For right now, we'll go ahead and pick out this hauler here. Izum will become our new record keeper. Oh, looks like I got 2 of them. Yay! And the one who has all the social skills here, we'll make that person our record keeper, because if they're going to be doing nothing else, I want them to at least be social otherwise. They don't have any skills assigned to our record keeper, so I'll temporarily assign them as a manager and then make a new profession from them. And when you discover you've made an error in a profession, you can come over here and edit it directly. And that's what I'm going to do. It's got 7 skills, and I don't want all 7 skills assigned. I don't want this person to have any skills. You could delete it and recreate it, or you can go down through the checkboxes and turn them all off until you've got 0 remaining, and that'll clear everything out. So that gets rid of all my other skills that I don't want my record keeper doing anything else. I want them building records, and that's it. Okay, so now we've got our record keeper set up and situated. Now, right now, I don't have anything else for them to do, in terms of actual jobs, so I can have my record keeper double as my manager. Later on, you won't want them to do that, but for right now, it works perfectly. Because I don't have any management tasks, it's all purely just record keeping. And the same office can double for both jobs. So that's nice. And our record keeper will come along, and we don't need them to actually be able to approve anything in order to use the profiles, so our record keeper will start keeping records. That'll get us an accurate count of how many of all the different kinds of stones we've got, and how many tables and chairs are in our fortress, and so on and so forth. Remember, our mason's still been cranking out tables and chairs, and haven't cleaned out his inventory in a while, so let's take a look and see how many he's built up.